Hello guys and welcome to the course Programming for Entrepreneurs, HTML and CSS. My name is Pablo Farias, I'm the founder of ZENVA and I'm very happy you're here. The goal of this course is to teach you how to code in HTML and CSS and to get familiar with basic web development concepts. The final product, what you will be building throughout this course, is this Metro style homepage, which could be an app as well, and has different elements that will show how you can use HTML and CSS to code your own prototypes. Now, a couple of things that I've learned throughout my experience with entrepreneurs is that all startups and businesses need development. You probably know that already, and that's why you're here. And I'm not talking about tech startups, but any kind of business needs to have at least a website. And also, developers are so expensive. That's something you probably know as well. So before we jump into the benefits of the course, of learning what you will be teaching here, I want to say that this course is not aimed to make you a hacker, but to give you basic skills that will allow you not to get ripped off in certain situations and to know exactly how to carry out some modifications and some aspects that you may need. So the benefits here is that you'll be able to modify your own website after taking this course. I often get requests from entrepreneurs that want to add a new link to their website or an image, and I want you to be able to do those things by yourself. Also, in all areas of human knowledge, the language, the vocabulary of that area is a key element for everything else. So think of what happens if you go to a mechanic shop and you don't know the names of the parts of the car. You're probably going to get ripped your ass off. So I'm going to teach you the basic concepts of web development so that you can express yourself with a developer and tell them what it is that you need, and that's going to make their life easier as well, and it's probably going to end up with a better product at the end and hopefully lower costs as well. After taking this course, you'll be able to build your own prototypes. There's a very popular methodology called the Lean Startup, which encourages entrepreneurs to make prototypes so that they can test and validate the assumptions of their business with potential clients or with their team. You could also use prototypes to show them to your potential investors and get early feedback before committing resources into building the real thing. More benefits. Learning how to code is a big challenge. You'll feel good after learning how to code. And they say programming is the new math. In the world we live in and in the world to come especially, programming is more and more of a necessary knowledge. Kids are learning how to program at school nowadays in some schools, and they will be probably in all schools in a few years. It's also important that you learn how to do things yourself. And as I said earlier, this course is not going to make you a hacker, but if you want to become one, there's no reason why you can't do it. You just need to spend the time that's needed and have the tools available. And this course is an entry point if you want to go into that path. The contents in this course that we'll cover, we'll look at some basic concepts in web development, and we'll learn how to code in HTML and CSS. HTML has to do with the structure of the page. So there's a title, there's links, there's text, there's images, and CSS is what makes that structure to look pretty and to look the way we want with regards to colors, layout, types of fonts, etc. So that's a really short sneak preview of what you'll be learning. Requirements. You need a web browser, and we'll use Google Chrome. You can download it in that link. And you will also need a code editor. And I've chosen Brackets by Adobe, which is a very new product. Now, why have I chosen such a new product? It's because it's the only code editor that allows me to make this course the way I want, which is to show you the changes that you make in the code, how they reflect immediately on the web browser. So I find it very friendly for beginners and for learners. I recommend that you use it as well for this first product. Hopefully it'll be a bit more mature in a few months. And you don't need any prior knowledge. Online courses are a new thing, so I'm gonna go through the methodology for this particular course. Online courses are self-paced. You do them on your own, or you can partner up with somebody else and meet up and do the lessons, which I think would work great in some cases. Besides being an instructor, I'm also a student in many courses, and it helps me when I set a schedule, when I set fixed times and due dates for the completion of the course. That helps me organize my time. Otherwise, things sometimes tend to dilute up to the point where you never finish them. You will probably watch a few videos, and then I want you to play with the code as well, to download the source file, the source code of the course, and to modify things. Some people like to code along with the video, so they code as they watch. If you have two screens, that will make it easier. And you need to have a proactive attitude, especially when learning things related to IT and programming. Nobody's going to teach you everything. There's a lot of stuff on the web. A lot of things get changed over time. So you need to have that active attitude. And there's a question section, mainly for peer-to-peer interaction, especially on free courses. You might even find a co-founder there. I'll try to keep an eye on it, but I'll leave it mostly for peer-to-peer interaction. At the end of the course, it'd be really, really awesome if you can fill out the survey form that I posted. I'm very interested in knowing what you think about the course, which parts you liked the most, which parts you hated, if you hated any, hopefully not. How the contents, how are they helping you with what your goals were? What else do you want to learn? What are your learning goals for this year, for next year? What should our next course be about? A little bit more about ZENVA. We're a global tech startup based in Chile. You can learn more about us in our website. We're on Twitter and Facebook as well. We post a lot of interesting links regarding technology and development. And we also run a blog called Game Dev Academy, which is focused on people who want to learn how to make games and apps. And we cover a lot of topics regarding entrepreneurship as well. We have a bunch of other courses that you're welcome to check out on mobile apps, game development, web development, and there are other programming for entrepreneur courses in the labs that may be out when you're watching this. So make sure you check those as well, like follow-ups to learn more advanced skills. So it's time to begin. Download the required programs that I posted earlier. And in the next lesson, we're going to cover some basic concepts of web development. All areas of human knowledge have their own language. And once you learn that language, you begin to understand what that area really has to offer. This applies to finance, to health, to car mechanics, and to web development as well, and IT in general. So I'm going to go through some basic concepts that will help you navigate throughout this course and through having to deal with IT professionals, or if you want to get started with your own IT projects and build your website or your app. This, I think, will be a good starting point. Let's begin by the very basics. What is the internet? Well, for some people, that's a place where they share photos, they share their LOL cats, documents. But if we go a bit more strict to what the definition is, the internet is actually a bunch of computers spread all around the world that talk to each other using a certain protocol, a certain language that's called TCP/IP. It's not a language, but that's what they use to communicate to each other. And from the internet, the World Wide Web came out, which is a network of hypertext documents that are linked to each other, what we know as web pages, websites. In 1990, the first web browser came out. It was called www, and it's what you see on the screen. So you need what's called a web browser to open websites, and websites are made in a language called HTML. So the web today has gone quite far from that early beginnings, and we have all sorts of things now, like social networks and multimedia, messaging, documents, and everything you can think of. But the basics remain kind of the same in terms of this model. So there's a client, which is your computer, your web browser, that makes a request to the cloud, to the server, and it receives from the server a response. When you go to Facebook, you're making a request to the Facebook server, you're asking for the Facebook page, and the server sends you back a response which contains the files, like the actual HTML file, the CSS files, and the images of that Facebook page, and then you enter your login. That gets sent again to the server and another request, and if your login is correct, you get a response back, and that's the page that shows your friends and all of the other stuff. If your password is wrong, then you get a response that says your password is wrong. So this basic interaction is a core element of web development, and I want you to keep this in mind. The client is your web browser. We have many web browsers out there, and something important to keep in mind as well is that we live in a post-PC world, in a post-computer world, where computers are not the only device that you can use to access the internet. There's phones, tablets, TVs, refrigerators, and more devices are now capable of connecting to the internet. The client usually is what the user sees, the presentation. So you get the Facebook page, right? You see the photos of your friends, their status, but that's not the actual data. It's just what's been sent to you. But they have the data is saved in a database in the server. So, and the client also receives the user input and sends that to the server. The languages used on the client side, the technologies used, are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML and CSS have to do with mostly with appearance. So HTML is just the structure and the content, and then that content becomes pretty with CSS. CSS takes care of font families, font types, layouts, colors, sizes of the fonts, of the elements, alignments, and a whole bunch of other stuff. JavaScript takes care of interactivity. It adds logic to your web page, so and it's more and more common that there's more and more logic on the client side, and JavaScript is used for that. On the server, on the other hand, a server is basically a computer in a data center. That's what it is. A computer which could be like a grid of many computers connected to each other, but it's the simplest way to see it. It's a computer located somewhere in the world, most likely in a data center. When we talk about the cloud, we're usually talking about, we're always talking about some servers, some computers located somewhere in the world that are keeping my files and my photos and my information. Servers have databases where they keep information, and they also take care of the business logic. Data validation. So if I send my user and password to the server, it gets checked against the database. Does this user exist? Is this user's password the one that they sent? Is that correct? That checking is done on the server side. There are many different languages used on the server side. There's PHP, Java, Python, Ruby, JavaScript that I mentioned earlier is also used as a server-side language, and there's a bunch more server alternatives. Some things that are done in the server. So when you talk to your developer or when you're planning your project, you always need to think which things are going to be done in the client and in the server. So everything that has to do with you creating data, storing data, saving data, updating, deleting data, that's all really happening on the server. You, as a client in your web browser, you get the view that shows you a table of elements and a delete button in each one of them, but the actual data is stored in the cloud, in the server. So everything that has to do with logging and logout as well is done against server-side checks, and saving files, saving photos, saving documents. That's all sent to the server, and that's where it's stored. And when I say server, it could be like many different servers for one web application. So sometimes it could have the database in one server and then the files in a different server and then connect to each other, but that's behind the scenes for you. I don't want you to leave this course without knowing without knowing anything about HTML5. HTML5 is the latest specifications of HTML, and it takes HTML to a whole new level where there's much more interactivity, much more behavior, integration with some of your device's native features like camera. And if you learn HTML5 all the way, you can make not only websites but also all sorts of apps, mobile apps, TV apps, or any apps for any device that supports HTML5, and also games. You can make mobile games or desktop games, and you can also make like Windows programs or Mac programs or desktop computer applications. You can make those too. And well, we're not covering this in this course. It's sort of a building that I've made. At the bottom, you have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Those are the core sort of web technologies for the client. On top of that, you build on the newer HTML5 specs, on CSS3, which is a newer CSS that has animations and a bunch of other stuff. JavaScript APIs that allow you to connect to the GPS of your device, to camera. And then there are more libraries that you can learn that will help you, like jQuery, that helps you manipulate what's going on the page. That's a really simple way of putting it. jQuery Mobile, it allows you to create like the mobile version of the page, so that it will render in all sorts of mobile phones, even old ones. And then you need some sort of cloud or some sort of server side. You can build your own server side, or you can use existing backend called backend as a service. And on top, and when you've reached that point, you can actually build apps that are for many platforms: iOS, Android, Windows Mobile, BlackBerry. And we have another course by ZENVA, which goes through this entire building all the way to the top, from the beginning all the way to the top, which I recommend you check out as well, especially when you finish this course and you get a good grasp of HTML and CSS. That's called iOS and Android HTML5 apps for beginners. And now we're all good to get started with the basics of HTML. In this lesson, we're going to get started with our first HTML document. We need to open brackets or some other code editor that you want to use, and go to File, New, create a new file called index.html. As you can see, HTML files are basically text files. They're nothing more than text files. And I've also opened my web browser. I'm using Google Chrome, and I launched it by clicking on the live preview button, so that the text that I modify, the files that I modify in here, will automatically be updated in the web browser. If you're not using brackets, what you need to do is press F5 to refresh the page every time that you change the code, because otherwise the browser doesn't know that you've changed the code. Anyway, as you can see, this is simply a text file. If I save this, it'll show me the text in the web browser. And now, how does the browser know when we are creating just words, or if it's a table, or if it's a title, different paragraphs? Well, HTML uses what's called tags. We create tags and put things inside of those tags, and the web browser knows what those tags mean and interprets it, and it shows it to you in the right way. So, for example, I want to have a main title in here, which will be a title level 1, so the main title of my document. And as you can see, the browser does not know that this is the main title. Well, I need to enclose this in tags. I'm going to have an opening tag at the beginning and then a closing tag at the end. The tag for title number 1 is called H1. So this is how I create a tag H1. This is the opening tag, and brackets automatically created the closing tag. But I want the closing tag to be in here, so I'm just cutting it and pasting it at the end. So as you can see now, the browser knows that this is a title 1 and it's not just text. You can also have title number 2, and you can go all the way to title 6. Now imagine I want to have different paragraphs, and then another paragraph in here. Well, the web browser doesn't know that these things belong to different paragraphs. They enter the new lines as I've been doing it, and as you usually do them when you work with, say, Microsoft Word, are not recognized by the browser as paragraphs. If you want to have a paragraph and have it recognized as such, you need to use a tag called P for from paragraph. So it's just the letter P, and you put one at the beginning and one at the end of each one of your paragraphs. If I save now, it'll show me the different paragraphs. So as we've seen, HTML files are nothing more than text files. They're simply text files that follow certain rules, that have certain tags which have a meaning, and the web browser knows how to interpret those tags. One of the main concepts of the web, of web pages, and it's where the word web comes from, is the fact that pages are connected to each other, and you can go from one page to another using what's called links. So in this lesson, we're gonna cover how to create links in your web pages. I have a simple document in here, and I'd like to have a link where it says here, so that if you click on here, it'll take you to DuckDuckGo, which is an alternative to Google. So the tag for links is called A. It's just the letter A. That's an A tag. So I'm opening up the tag and closing it here. Now, tags can also have attributes, and in this case I'm going to create an attribute that will point to the direction of this website. So the attribute that you use when creating links, it's called href, and in here I just need to enter whichever URL we are going to. So that's a link. And now if I click in here, it takes me to DuckDuckGo. Now we've all seen that sometimes when you click on a link, it opens up a new tab. So that's a bit it's not that intrusive. And if you want to force that to happen, if you want the link to open a new tab, you can add another attribute to your A tag, which is called target, and then you just write _blank, and that will make it so that if I click, it'll open the link in a new tab. So what's the takeaway here? A tag is used for links. Tags can have attributes. We'll be looking at other attributes for other tags as well throughout this course. And if you want to create a link, you use an attribute called href, and that's where you put the target URL. And you can also specify the target attribute and write blank if you want that to open in a new tab. In this lesson, we'll see how to add images to our documents. So I have an image that's in the same folder as my index page, and it's called santiago.png, and I'm gonna show it here so that you can see the place where I'm at the moment. The tag for images is img, and we need to specify the location of the image using the attribute src, as in source. So I'm gonna type the name of the file, which is in the same folder as index.html, and see how it's already showing it to me. Now the main difference with the other tags we've used so far is that image is a tag that closes on itself. So instead of having an opening tag and a closing tag, we just have one tag, and then that tag is closed like this. this represents a self-closing tag, so we don't need to have another like closing tag like this. That should be enough to have the photo in there. And I'm gonna add a new line as we learned before using the break tag. And now what if I can do a bit of an image resizing in here as well. Using width, I can specify a new width in pixels, and that will scale the image, keeping the aspect ratio. Now, if I also specify the height, then the aspect ratio is not going to be respected anymore. That's if I set the two of them. If I set just one of them, the other dimension will adjust accordingly. And when we learn CSS, we're also going to learn other ways of resizing elements, and we'll also learn a different manner of having space in between elements. But this is good for now. So takeaway here: image tag for images, img. You specify the source, and you can have you can do a bit of tweaking with the image dimensions as well. In this lesson, we'll be looking at lists. HTML has two types of lists: ordered lists, which have a number. Each element in the list has a number, and unordered lists, which are usually used as bullet points, for instance. Both kinds of lists share a similar structure, but I'm gonna begin with ordered lists. So to create an ordered list, we need a tag that's OL from ordered list, and inside of that tag, each one of the elements in this list is going to be inside a LI tag. So this would be, say, pizza. Using the key Control D or Command D, you can duplicate the line, so that's quicker to work with. And there we have an ordered list. I should probably change the items, but it's just to show you how to use it. When it comes to an unordered list, you open this with UL, and the elements inside are also going to be LI tags. So there you go, two types of lists. And another concept as well. In here we have elements that are inside of a tag, tags inside of the previous tag, and I've intuitively put on some space in between. That's what's called indentation, and it's a very common practice by developers to use indentation in the code. And it helps you see hierarchy, see which elements are inside of which other elements. It makes it a lot easier to work with the code. Just as we are doing line breaks in here when we don't really need to have them, because this could be just like this and it would look exactly the same. But because we're humans and we have a way of perceiving the world, using indentation is always considered a good practice, and I strongly recommend that you use it as well. In this lesson, we'll be covering tables, creating tables in HTML. The way you create a table is by using the table tag. And inside of a table, I'm going to be using indentation, separation, just to make it obvious what the hierarchy is, what belongs to where. We're going to create now a few rows with the tag tr, which stands for row. And inside of the row, you create cells. So I'm going to have one that says month, sales, and let's do costs. I'm going to create now a second row, which is going to have another 3 cells, and this one will have January, many millions, and 0 costs. And from there you can just duplicate this one and have a few more rows. Just fix it so that it looks a bit nicer. And here you have a very simple table. Now, what about borders, spacing? Well, we're leaving all of the styling to CSS, the other programming language that we'll be learning. But if you just want to have borders in your table, there's a way of doing it which comes from the pre-CSS era, which is a tag that's called border. You can just add it a 1, and then you have a border. Also, there's another there's a more semantically correct way of structuring a table, because we know that these are the headers, right? And this is the body of the table. So we can create, we can add a tag in here that's called thead. That means the header of the table, and we'll place the header row inside the head. Also, these are not ordinary cells, these are headers. So there's another tag which is th. That's what we want to have in here. The browser already has some default styling for it, so as you can see, it's been made bold. And the body should also be in a body tag, and you can put all of that in here. And you can have a footer as well. Now, why does this matter at all? It does and it doesn't. It all depends. When you're styling, it's sometimes easier to work in this manner, because then you can address directly what's in the header or what's in the body and give it different styles. That's one reason why it's good to do it like this. Another reason has to do with the semantics, with the meaning of what a table is. So semantics has to do with meaning, right? And the header of a table has a different meaning than the body of a table. And search engines are getting smarter and smarter, and they're considering semantics when they index your page. Say Google indexes your table, and eventually they might be able to pull data from that table. So that's why also semantics is something important to keep in mind. Web pages don't only show information, but they also receive information from the users. The main channel of interaction with a website is called a form. A form has a bunch of fields that take on user input. You can have text fields, text areas, selections of different items, checkboxes, and a whole bunch of other input fields. With the new HTML5, there are also new fields that have come out. You can have now color pickers, date pickers, ranges of numbers. So forms is definitely a core element in HTML, and in this lesson we're going to create our first form and see how it works. So I'm going to mention as well that the processing of the form is done on the client side, usually by JavaScript, and on the server side it's done as well. So your server checks that the form that was submitted is valid. We're not covering any of that in here. We're just learning how to structure a form using HTML. A form usually goes in a form tag, and inside of the form tag you add the different inputs, and then eventually you create a button to submit. So you give the user the option to submit your form, which is to send it to you, to your server. Okay, I'm gonna create the first input, which is gonna be of type text. So type here is an attribute of the input tag, and I'm gonna close. It's gonna be a self-closing tag. So there you go. You have a simple text field. Now, you've seen that text fields can have a default value as well sometimes, and you can enter that default value by using the attribute value, and then this is something that I can delete. And we've also seen input fields that come with like a help text in here. For example, if it's an email, it says like email inside of the input, and then when you click and you type, you don't have to erase what was previously there, you just type your own email. So that's called the placeholder, and I'm sure you've seen this on the web. Now I also want to create a button, so that's a button tag, and the type of button is going to be submit. And buttons are not self-closing tags. You need to enter the text of the button inside. Now, what if I wanted to have these things on different lines? Well, I've already mentioned that there's a break tag to have new lines, but there's a more correct way to do it, which is to create containers. And then you have different containers and they act as blocks. So they'll occupy, and each one will occupy a new line, and then you can have all of your elements. Because think of this case, I want to have a few of these inputs, and I might want to have them each one on a different line. Well, I'm going to introduce the div tag, which has to do with containers. So everything I put inside the div goes on a separate line, and then later on with CSS we will be able to change the way that these divs work, but for now they're just gonna act as new lines, and as think of them as containers. That's the way to see them, like a block of content or of functionality inside your page. Just to summarize, forums are the main way for the users to interact with your website, and they've been around on the web for long, but new elements, new input fields have been coming out. We saw that a form needs to be inside a forum tag. It usually has inputs or different, not just input tags, we'll look at some others, but it has stuff for the user to enter information basically, and it has a way to submit the form. Also, we took a quick look into divs, which are containers, and we're going to start using them from now on. And they are something like boxes that can group your code in a certain block. I want to show you some other types of input fields. We've looked at the text type of input field, but the ones I'm going to show you are somehow newer. They might not work in all web browsers, but they're increasingly supported by more web browsers. One of them is forces you to enter or allows you to enter numbers. So it's of type number, and you can also give it a default value if you want. So we'll give it a default value of 5. You can give it a minimum 1 and a maximum of 10. Now, when using these constraints, never forget that no matter what you do in your server, this should also be checked. So this is just it makes it easier for the user not to enter wrong data. But if someone really wants to enter wrong data, they'll find a way to send that through. And so you need to have that check in your server as well. See that we have this nice number input that lets you enter a number within a range. Another type of input field which I find quite nice is the color. It's a color picker, and it'll throw the color window that's native to your operating system. So if you're on Mac, this is going to look very different. Then there's the date input. lets you pick a date from a calendar. And the last one I'm gonna mention is the range type of input, which is a bit similar to this one here, but it's more visual. So this one might be better to have when you have maybe a higher range, when it's like a softer, when there's more points in between. So that's a range type of input. And there are many more that you can look up. So as you can see, there are really a bunch of options to have different types of inputs, and some of these ones, like color and date in particular, are not yet fully supported in all web browsers, but they're getting there quite quickly. And yeah, and probably they'll be adding new ones as well in the future. I hope so. In this lesson, I'm gonna cover another type of input field in a form, which is a text area. It's not like a text input that's just that's only one line of text that is fairly small. This one's a bigger text area. So this one uses a tag that's called text area, and it's a tag that's not self-closing. If you want to have default content, you can add it like this, and it'll be in your text area. You can also specify the number of rows and columns that you want to have in your text area by using some attributes, like rows. For instance, we want to have 20 rows, and cols is used for columns. 100. Maybe it's too much. Yeah. So as you can see, you need to close this properly, and the text area is another type of input field in your form that you can use, and it's this one's fully supported, and all the other ones we'll see are also fully supported. They've been around for a long time. In this lesson, we'll be looking at adding multiple selections, drop downs, and selections where you can click on multiple elements. For that, we'll be using the select tag, and you add the different options to your drop down by using the option tag. I'm gonna add pizza number 1 and add a whole bunch more using a Control D or Command D. And as you can see, that's how you get drop down selection. If you want to have one that's selected by default, you can add the selected attribute. And if I just type selected, it's the same as writing selected equals selected. So you can do it either way. It'll leave that one as the default selection. If you want to allow for multiple selection, then you add multiple in here, which is the same as adding multiple equals multiple. So you can do either way, and it'll turn this into one of those multiple selection lists. You could have more than one that's selected by default. In this case, say those two are selected by default. So as you see, by using the select tag, we can create drop downs and multiple selection inputs. You specify the difference by using the multiple attribute. You can just type multiple. You don't need to have that. It'll work in the same manner. And to specify what's selected by default, use selected. And again, that's the same as just doing this. Well done! You've completed the basics of HTML. We've gone through most of the most relevant tags, and we just have a couple more items left before we jump into CSS. Using HTML and CSS, we'll be able to get this dashboard homepage, Metro kind of thing, up and running. And just a couple more things I will be going through when it comes to HTML. I want to show you the main structure of a HTML file. So far we've just coded straight on the text file, but there's usually a more formal way of doing this. And then I want to build this entire thing using only HTML before we jump into CSS. So it'll just look like an ugly listing of elements. And then when we get into CSS, you'll see how we can work from there and giving the elements more of the look that they should have. So the first thing I mentioned, the more formal way of having a HTML file. HTML files usually have two main parts. They have a head and they have a body. The head contains information about the page. It's not information that you'll see on the web browser. You'll see the title, you'll see it on the top. So see how I'm adding the title in here inside of head. So actually this should be like this, just so that it looks more organized. The title is what you see on top of your tab or your web browser when you're on that page. And then the other thing that I'm defining is the character set. You don't really need to understand this, but this basically what it says is that it's using a certain convention for text. And if you're just typing in English, it won't matter. But if you add characters from other languages and you don't have this defined, you'll see them not displaying properly. So you need to have this to have all the characters from other languages as well. And well, this is how you start your document. This just tells whatever program that opens this document, it tells it that it will be HTML type of file following the latest HTML5 rules. You always begin by having a global, like a main sort of HTML tag. So everything that you do is inside here. And then the body is what we've been doing all along. The body is what's shown on the actual page. So we started by creating H1 titles, right? And all of the other things that we did, that all goes in here. We didn't do it, and the browser is smart enough to know what we were trying to do, but when you get to the actual real page, it's better if you keep on this structure and put all of your actual page content inside of body. It's time for us to build the structure of this final result that we want to achieve. And I'm going to build that in pure HTML. So it's going to look like a very ugly list. It's going to be displayed here. And once we jump into CSS, we'll be adding the colors and all the other elements that you can see in here. So this also serves as a summary of all the tags that we learned throughout the HTML part of the course. Some notes regarding the general structure of this page. Everything in here is going to be inside of a div, of a container, and then each one of the tiles that you see is going to be inside of its own div. Later on, we'll make those tiles to sort of float around and have a certain separation between each other and a certain padding inside and a few other things. For now, it's all going to be just a vertical list of things. So let me begin by creating the very main box, and then I'll be adding one box for each one of these tiles. The first tile, it has a title 2 that says features, and then it has an unordered list with I'll be pasting some of the code, so you don't have to wait for me to type it all. It's all stuff that we've already covered. We have an unordered list with 3 different links that they have my homepage for now. That's the first one of these tiles. The second one, it has just 3 different containers. And see how this 15, I've put it inside span. That's a new tag, something we hadn't seen before. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I just want to give styling to this particular part of the text. So I will not want to give style to the entire box, and I want it all to be on the same line. So span is like a neutral. It's like a box, but that doesn't take up any space. So if I add, see that the 15, it's not in a different line, it's not separated in a different manner. Span is just a way to select some parts of the text so that you can give it later on some different styling. That's all it does. So that's our second tile. And the third tile, that's the to-do list. It's going to begin by a title 2, and then the second type of list, which is an ordered list. And you create an ordered list by using the OL tag, and just like the unordered list, it uses the LI tags to represent each one of the list elements. Right, following tile, it has an image and a number. For the image, we'll be using our image tag, img tag, and the source is a file called charts.png, which is provided as well. I'm giving it a certain width, and therefore for 4,800, it goes on another box, right? So that's our fourth tile. The fifth tile has a table in it. We've already learned how to make tables as well. This table is going to have a header and then a body. Inside of the table tag, I'll create the head of the table, which has only one row, tr, and then it has three header titles, th, like this. Now we also need the body, and the body has a bunch of rows, which I'm just gonna paste in here, and see how each row has 3 different cells. So we have the header, the body, and that's our tile. That's what it has. We have 2 more left. The order pizza tile, it has title 2, and then it has a form. So we open up the form tag, and inside the form we have a selection, an input, a number type of input, and a text input, and well, a button as well. Let me add this one here, select, and as you can see, it's the select tag with options for each option. Then we have a number type, and we have a text field that has a placeholder that says comment, and finally we have a button to submit the form. You could add type submit if you want as well, but it's not really needed. And the last one, it has an image as a background, which is something that we haven't looked into yet. That's something you can do with CSS, is give a box, a div, you can give it an image as a background. So we're just going to have the text for now, which are 2 different divs. And 36 degrees, which is not the temperature at the moment, but that's what I'm putting there. Alright, so we have in here the entire HTML structure of what we want to build, and what comes next is giving it life, sort of speaking, giving it a styling, CSS, and that will allow you to arrange the elements, their positions, to have the dimensions, specified types of font, sizes of the font, background colors, background images, and a whole bunch of other stuff. CSS is what you use to give the page a certain aspect. It has to do with colors, with font sizes, and it serves as a way of separating what's the structure, the content of our page, which is done in HTML, from the appearance. You could, in theory, have more than one CSS file and have, for instance, one CSS file apply for a certain version and a different one for another one. So think that maybe different clients will have different CSS rules on how their view of the page looks, or you could have CSS files that are different for web and mobile. And I'm going to show you in this lesson 3 ways of adding CSS to your document. The first way that we'll look, the first manner, is to add a style tag. And inside the style tag, you can add CSS code. When working with CSS, things usually work the following way. Firstly, you select something from the document. So it could be a selection that includes, say, all title 2, or it could be a more specific selection, such as I want this particular list element to be selected. So I'm going to select here the entire body of the page. When you want to select something by its tag, you just write the tag inside your CSS code. And then you open curly brackets, and inside those curly brackets, using indentation hopefully, but you don't have to, you'll add certain rules to modify the appearance of what you've selected. So select something and then change the appearance of that selection. I've selected the body and I want to change its background color. There are a lot of CSS properties that you can access, and we'll cover some of the main ones throughout this series. When you enter a color, you could enter you can write the color in English. Some of the most commonly used colors are recognized, for instance yellow, or you could also write the hexadecimal number, which you can grab from any painting program. When you have a color picker, it usually shows the hexadecimal value. We'll look at that as well in a bit. So this is one of the ways of adding CSS, which is adding style tags in your HTML code. The second way of adding CSS has to do with adding the CSS on the specific element. So that serves as a selection. You just add a style attribute, and this basically means that I've selected this particular title 2, not all titles 2, and I'm going to say that I want this one to have a background color of green. When you add the style in the tag itself, it always has a priority over any more general rules that you might have defined. Now, important thing, adding CSS code inside the HTML document, like I'm doing now, is not the most recommended way of doing it, because, as I mentioned earlier, you want to have a clear separation of structure / content from appearance. And if we want to have, so the best way to do it is to have external CSS files. And I've created a file called style.css. CSS files are also just text files. And I'm going to add the link to that file in the head of my document. So this is referring to a file called style.css, which I've opened as well. So let's take a look at that file. I'm going to use, I've opened the entire folder by going to File, Open Folder, and this should probably be in English just to make it easier for you. So you go to File, you open Folder, and then you open the entire folder where all of your files are. And once you do that, you can use Control Tab or Command Tab just to switch between the files that you have open. So I'm in style.css now. I'm gonna get rid of this rule here, and I'll be adding that same rule but in style.css. So you can see that this is much it looks much cleaner than having it in the HTML code itself. So just to summarize, CSS is used to take care of the appearance of your page. You can have CSS in your HTML document by using style tags. You can also do what's called inline CSS on the actual tags, but the most recommended way is to have an external file called style.css. I mean, you can call it however you want, but it's best if it's outside of the HTML document. In this lesson, I want us to talk a little bit more about selection, about selecting elements with CSS. I've already mentioned that you can select elements by their tag, by just writing the tag's name. Here I'm selecting the body of the page, but I could select all titles too, or I could select all list elements, right? All links. So that's how you can select just by tag. It's just writing the tag. But I might want to have to address one particular element, and I can, in order to do that, I have to create a unique ID and give that element an ID. For example, we have this div here, which has to do with the interview, and I can give this div an identifier, ID, and write a unique name, interview. You can't use the same name for ID in two elements. You can only use it in one element. Now, how can I refer to that ID in my CSS code? You need to use the hash sign and then the name of the ID, interview. And I can start writing now rules for this element. So I can tell it that the background color is going to be green. So that's selecting by ID. And it can also happen that you want to have many elements to be the same family or class. In our working example, all of these divs have the same class, and that class is called tile. And all tiles will have certain properties. So I'm going to add that class, which is tile. I'm going to be adding that in all of the elements that I want to look and behave like tiles. Order pizza and Santiago. It's the last one over here. And now I can change the styling for all of those elements at the same time by using the dot and then the name of the class, tile. See how that's already selecting all of the divs. Background color red. So those are the main ways that you can use for selection. We'll look into nested selections as well, so that I can say, for instance, all the list elements that are inside of an element of class tile. Things like that. You can also go sort of inside the actual elements, but for now we'll just do this, selecting by tag, selecting by ID. IDs are unique, don't forget that, and selecting by classes. You can have the same many elements, even different types of elements, sharing the same class. If you've been paying attention to what we've been doing so far, you probably noticed that there are some default styles in the browser. There are spaces in between some of these elements that I haven't explicitly defined. We have a certain font size in here, the fact that it's bold. Same for this part in here for the titles of the table, And I want us to cover in a bit what's called the box model. It's one of the main core concepts in CSS, and I think having these default styles affects in a way, because it's putting on margins and that we don't necessarily want to have, like this separation here. And the thing is also that different web browsers or different devices might have different default for these things. So maybe one browser will have a certain number of pixels for separation of a title number 2, or for indenting of a list, but then another web browser will have different values for these separations. So what I think is good to use when you're creating your own styles is what's called a reset.css file, that you can find them online. I've provided one with the course files, and we'll have that included in all of the videos from now on, so that we have full control of what this thing is going to look like. Some of the stuff is not covered by this file, like the links are still going to look blue, but we are also going to change that in a bit. So I'd recommend you to have a quick look at the file reset.css, and if you look at it now, you won't understand anything of it. It's not going to make sense. It's just a text file with a lot of CSS. But by the end of the course, I want you to open it again and just have another look. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to find a lot of it interesting to look at, that you're going to understand a lot of what's there. Not everything, but it's not going to be like a completely foreign language to you, like it might be if you look at it now. So what I'll do now is include this file, duplicating the line using Control D or Command D, and it has to go at the beginning, because you want it to reset the styles, and then from then on you're going to overwrite, you're going to add your own styles. Whereas if you put it after style.css, it might mess up with your own styles, it might replace them. So as you can see now, it got rid of all of that stuff, that now the titles and the lists don't have any sort of margin, spacings, and you're good to go and to get started with the box model in the next video. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about the box model. To me, the box model is the core of CSS. If you understand it well, your life would be so much easier when working with CSS. So I want to make sure that you get it right the first time, and it's just gonna save you hours. And once you understand it, you'll feel like you can build anything with CSS. It has to do with the way content is packed in boxes, and it's separated from other content, and it defines what we usually understand by width and height, those dimensions. Alright, so let's say you have a div, right? A certain block. You can add a border to that block, and the border is going to have a certain height, a certain width, and that dimension can be different on the top, on the bottom, on the left, and on the right. The border property is then what we use for that, and we specify the border, the dimension, the length in pixels. You can also specify it in other units of measure, but we'll work with pixels. Inside your border, you can have a separation between where your border begins and where the actual content begins. That's called the padding. You can also have a padding on the top that may be different from the padding on the bottom and the padding on the left and on the right. And then you have your content. And when you specify the width or the height of your content, of your div, what you're specifying is actually just this inner part. Whatever you specify for width will have the other dimensions added to it. So the final, the real width or the real height is going to include not just what you enter as height or what you entered as width, but also the padding, the border, and then the margin. And what's the margin? The margin is the separation between, it's like a forced separation that you impose between your block, where is starting from where the border ends, to other elements that might be around. So the total width of your div, of your block, is going to be the margin on both sides, plus the border on both sides, plus the padding on both sides, plus what you entered as the width property. For the height, same concept. Margin top plus border top plus padding top plus height plus padding bottom plus border bottom plus margin bottom. Let's have a look at the code. I have the tiles in here, and I'm gonna give them a certain width, which is gonna be 100 pixels, and I want to have a border which is gonna be of 20 pixels, and it's gonna be solid, and it's gonna be we'll just leave it black by default, but I could write, say, cyan. And I also want to have a padding of another 20 pixels. See how what I said earlier is making sense? And now, well, the margin will say that it's of 50 pixels. You can also specify these properties separately. So you can do if you type two values, the first one is going to be for up and down, top and bottom, and this one left and right. And you can also go like this. You can specify, say, just padding left. This will make it more obvious. You can add left, right, top, bottom, and top. And you can have that for your border, for your padding, for your margin. That's the takeaway here. That's what you need to learn. That's the box model, the basics of the box model. See how the total width, I'm specifying the width of 100, but that's only the inner part, because the real width of this whole thing, you need to add all the other dimensions, and you have to keep that in mind, because sometimes you'll be like, hey, I specified the width of 100, why is it still so big, or why is it not fitting on the space? And it's because you're not adding the other parts as well. So this is the box model, and I've provided the image file as well. Now we're ready to move on and to some other concepts. In this lesson we'll be learning the difference between blocks and floating elements. If you look at the tiles, I've defined some dimensions and properties to them that we've seen during the box model lesson, and you see that they all display on one line. So we have the div, and then there's a clearing, and then we have another div. So they're not displayed, even though they could fit in one next to the other. They're shown like this. If we want them to stick to each other and try to occupy all the space, we need to use a property called, we need to make them floating elements, and then we specify if they float to the left or to the right. I'm gonna make them float to the left, just to show you what this is gonna make. So now see how, as I change the dimension of the page, that the elements occupy all the space that they can. And it's important to understand that this is this can be used. You can keep this in mind if you're thinking of, say, different screen resolutions. So think if we're on desktop, or we're on a tablet, or we're on a mobile phone. It's going to be smaller, and they are going to occupy all the space that they can, because the container they're inside, that main container that I created, it doesn't have fixed dimension, a fixed width. If it had a width, then these blocks would only occupy as much as they could, provided that they don't go outside of that dimension. So I'm going to give this element an ID, which is going to be main container, and I'm going to add that ID to my code. I'm going to select the element by its ID, and we'll give it a width of 900 pixels. Don't forget to add the pixels when you write these numbers, or it's not going to be recognized. So you can see now that two things happen. If I make this bigger, they don't occupy more space than what they can, which is 900, and it's actually being marked by this blue line. But that's something cool Brackets does, that it sort of shows you what's going on in the browser. And also, if I reduce the size of the screen, they are still not going below, because even though the screen is smaller, the width of the container is still 900. And if I take the floating property away, they're blocks again. And I could also make them float to the right, in which case it would work in a different manner. So just to summarize, when you make elements float, they stick to each other. If you make them float to the left, they'll go all to the left, or to the right, if you specify right, and they'll try to occupy all the space they can. And the space they can occupy can be the entire browser screen, if bigger container has a certain width, or they'll respect the width that their container has. Besides specifying a fixed width, you can also have a range. You can have a minimum and a maximum width, so that the elements will adjust accordingly. So for instance, say that I have a maximum width of 900. That means that the width can be anything from 0 to 900, and it will adjust to the size of the browser. So in this case, they all show in a column, but as the size increases, they'll adjust accordingly until they reach a limit, which is the 900 for this element, for the container. See that it goes all the way here, so there's no more room for this tile to move up. That's something you can do as well if you want to have control of the size of these things, and you don't want to have one fixed width, but you want to have a certain range. So let's think of a minimum width as well. Imagine that I don't want to have one on top of the other like this. The minimum that it has to be is like this. Then I can specify a minimum width, say 500, and now it's not gonna go any smaller than that. So see how even though this is not really doing much, it's already acting like a responsive little web app that would adjust to different screen resolutions. And I want to show you now how to make this whole thing to be centered on the page. I'm going to show you how to center a container horizontally. So let me just give these tiles a background color so that we can distinguish them more easy from the background. Actually, I'm going to give that to this guy here. Background color, I will say that it's blue. Well, this one, blue. And so the width is increasing until it reaches a point, and you can center it once the width is fixed. So you either have a fixed width in here, or when you reach the maximum width, in this case, that's when we'll center it. So the way we do that is by defining the margin property, and for top and bottom we're just gonna say 0. But for the sides, this is the important part. This could be some other number, but you need to define the left and the right as auto. And when that happens, now that we make this grow, see that the div is now centered on the page. You can do this as well in for instance, if I wanted to center some content inside of these tiles, since these tiles have a fixed width. I mean, the inner element would need to have a fixed width, and then if I define the margins like this, it will usually center. There might be some cases when it doesn't work like that, if there's more combination of floating elements and things like that, but just most of the time this will be enough to center an element. In this lesson I'm going to show you how to center a div, a container, horizontally. We want to center our main container, selected by the ID main container, which contains all of the content. It's in here. So one thing you need to know about centering divs horizontally is that the width of that div needs to be fixed, or if I set a maximum width, we need to be over that value. So basically there has to be a width that's set somehow. So if we have less than that value, it's not going to center. And now how do we center it? Well, I'm going to add some margins. For the top and bottom, I'm just going to add 0. If you're adding 0, you don't need to write pixels, but if I'm writing 10, for instance, I should write pixels. And then for the sides, you need to set it as auto. That will cause it so that when you grow to the corresponding size, it centers. Now if I'm a bit confused with the whole growing concept, I could just have it fixed and that's it, and then it should be centered. For example, 500, and the tiles do not seem centered, but if you look at the top, the blue line, that's the actual container, and that is being centered. When you're under that value, of course, you're just by the sides because there's no more room. But when you're over that value, it gets centered in this manner. And this same technique you can use not only with the main container, but also you could use with stuff that's inside the tiles. You could have those centered as well if those elements have a fixed width. In this lesson, we'll be looking at how to add a background image for a container, and we're also going to add some of the classes that we need to have if we want to get this web app built. So I'm going to get rid of the interview thing, and I'm going to be adding some other styles in here. That all have to do with different types of tiles that we will have. An element can have more than one class. So some of the tiles will be tile and then green, or tile red, tile yellow, and see how I'm using the hexadecimal number. And if you press Ctrl E or Command E, you get your color picker as well inside of brackets. Control or Command E is usually gives you editing options. So, for example, if I'm in the HTML file and I want to modify the tile class, I can just press Control or Command E, and it'll open up the part of the CSS file where I can modify it. So let me give these elements their corresponding classes. This is going to have the green one. You might argue that that's not really looking green, but that's alright. Let's get rid of the interview because we're not using it anymore. And this one's yellow. This one's going to be red. The chart is going to be the light gray one. Now the names that I chose, it has nothing to do with the fact that CSS recognizes the color. It's actually showing me the color, but that's I could have used any name. We're not using the red as in the color red. That's just a word for the class that I picked. And order pizza, that's a green one. And with the image, that's what I wanted to show you. I'm going to create a new one called city image. Now I'm gonna go to my CSS file and add city image for class edition. And the property that we're going to use in here is called background image. Background image, and then URL. You type URL and then quotes, and I have the file inside of this same folder, so it's just going to be santiago.png. Don't forget the semicolon at the end. And that should be enough to have the background image. Also, if you recall what this was looking like, the table tile wasn't really it was much wider than the other tiles, and it's actually because I created another different tile class called tile double. So let me add that one as well, so we can get it out of the way. Tile double is very similar to the other one, but it has different width. So there we go. We have background image, and it's starting to look more like it should look. Very last thing that I'm gonna add is just the final color for the background. Alright. In this lesson we'll be looking at how to style fonts, how to change the font family, how to change the font size to make it bold or underlined. And what we'll do is add a few properties to the body selection. So the first one that we want to look into is font family. In here you can write, for instance, Helvetica, and that changes the font to Helvetica. You can also have a fallback. So think what happens if your computer doesn't have Helvetica, then it will default to Courier. And then if it doesn't have Courier, it will default to the browser default font. So you can specify more than one. We're just going to leave Helvetica in here. And if you want to make it bold, you have to add font weight. Font weight bold. And we also want to change the color of the font, and then the property is just color, white. So let's go through each one of these tiles and change the corresponding fonts. There are the links in here. So I want to create a class. Alright, we are almost there. We're gonna look into adding styling to these lists, and I'm also gonna cover a little bit more of this inner selection concept that I mentioned previously. So just a quick reminder, what I'm doing here is I'm selecting all of the A elements that are inside of a tile list classed element. Now what if I have two types of elements that have this class? One of them is an unordered list, and then the other one is an ordered list. So what if I only want to select the unordered lists that have this class? Well, then I type unordered list, that's the tag, and then dot tile list. So that allows me to select just the see how this is only being selected and not this one here. This allows me to select only the unordered list that have this particular class. But I don't want to select just the unordered list. I want to select the li, the list elements inside of that ul. Let me just show you what I want to do. So so far I'm selecting this one, right? The ul element that has the tile list class, but I want to select the inner elements, and I already showed you how to select the inner elements, so it's the same thing. See that now it's only selecting the list, like the inner, the list, the individual list elements. And what I want to give those, firstly, it has to do with margins and that sort of stuff, spacing. That should all be clear now with regards to the box model. And there's a property that I can use called list style type. By default, it was the one called disk that we had previously, but see how you could have other options like circle, and that's like an unfilled circle. And there's some other ones that you can have, Armenian. I think I've used that one before. But we're gonna go back to the beginning and have the disk. But we are choosing to have it. It's not the browser default. And if another browser has another type of a bullet point as a default one, we're still gonna have the disk in here. I wanna do the same for the ordered list. So we'll select the ordered list that has the class tile list, and then we want the li elements inside of that. Just like before, we'll add some. That's the same, actually, the same styling properties, and we're going to have the list style type. In this case, it's going to be a decimal. That's numbers. Now we are repeating this twice. We're repeating this in here. I also could do it this way. I could select all of the elements from both lists. See how the elements from both lists are being underlined, and put this here so that we only have it once. When you're coding, it's always good to try to not to repeat things. So see how now we select all of them and we give them the margins that we want, but then we select each individual type just to give it the decimal. Strictly speaking, in this example, you could have done this in different ways. You could have just given a class to all the li elements and just address that class in here, or you didn't have to have the two of them share the same class like we did it, but I thought it would be good to cover this part, the selection part as well, because sometimes you'll find these when you look at the CSS code. You'll find these sort of things, and it makes it easier if you've gone through it at least once. So just to summarize, lists can be customized. They have different options for decoration, and if you want to change that, you can always do it using a list style type. Alright, the only thing that we have left is the table, and I'm going to do the styling of the table in this video. We'll give the table an ID. It's going to be users table. I'm going to add that, and in the code, this is where the table is. It's just going to be class or ID. Now, when to use class, when to use ID? Well, if it's just one element and you just want to adjust to a single element, you can use ID. But you can also use class. You've seen me use class for single elements. If you want to have more than one element, then you don't have a choice. You have to use ID for sure. So it's really up to you which one you prefer when it's just one element. I usually use ID for like more important elements that I consider that are like core parts, and classes I tend to think that I might reuse them later on. So there's not really a fixed criteria. It's really up to you. Strictly speaking, regarding the semantics, a class should have more than one because it could potentially have more than one. But if you know for sure there won't be another one, you could use an ID as well. So I want to give this table first of all, if I'm addressing the table element, and I define margins and all of that stuff, it has to do with the entire table, not with the single cells. So we'll style the table first, the outside, and then we'll go inside and do styling for the actual cells and the headers. You already know how to select elements now that are inside another element, so we'll keep on using that so that it consolidates in your head. Margins, I want to give this margin on the top of 10 and auto on the sides. That means centering. The font weight, which we said it was bold. In here I don't want it to be bold, I just want it to be normal. And we can also define a width of 100% so that uses up all the space it can. Now regarding the headers, users table and then th, that's how I'm selecting the headers. See how they're being selected in here. I want those to have a border in the bottom, just in the bottom, so that they look nice. And I'm giving them this color. I want them to have a padding so that the cell has some separation with the text of 2 pixels. And I would like the text to be aligned in the center. It's already been aligned in the center, but I want to force it just in case the browser is not doing it for me. That's for the headers. And now regarding the other cells, I'm going to select them using this same methodology, and they're also going to have a padding of 2 pixels, and I also want them to be aligned in the center. So that's about it for styling our table and for styling our example. So what you have now is just some sort of a sample web page or home page or web app or mobile app, and I've made it a bit responsive so that you can understand this concept as well of how things can adjust to screen resolution and how you can set up like a maximum so you don't want this to keep on expanding to the sides. And I think this covers pretty much all of the basics of HTML and CSS. So what I would recommend you to do now is to start working on your own projects. Hopefully you've started already, and wish you the best of luck in regards of these projects that you can make, on how you can make your wireframes now, or this can be your entry point to learning more programming, which is what I would strongly recommend. But anyway, you're capable now of making just very simple prototypes that you can show or use for different things. Congratulations, you've reached the end of Programming for Entrepreneurs, HTML and CSS. Let's remember that the goal of this course, which I hope has been accomplished, was to teach you how to code in HTML and CSS and to get you familiar with basic web development concepts. What you can build now is a website of this kind, which could be a prototype to show your potential clients, your team, your developer, your investor. And it's also an entry point to learning many more things in IT and programming and web development that will really allow you to build a lot of stuff to save you time, money, and to enjoy it as well. The concepts that we saw, we talked about the benefits of learning how to code in a world where programming is the new math, right? How it can allow you to communicate better with geeks, basically, with programmers, and how to create wireframes and prototypes of what you want to build. We went through some basic concepts regarding the internet, the client versus server side. That's something to keep in mind at all times. Which parts of your product are going to be on the client side and which ones on the server side. And on the client side, the main thing to keep in mind is that the languages used are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We've covered the first two. The second one is we have actually a course that's in the labs at the moment, and it might be out already when you watch this. So check it out as well. It's also aimed for entrepreneurs. And I didn't want you to leave this course without at least hearing about HTML5. It's the latest HTML specs. It allows you much more integration with different devices, like accessing the camera of your device or the GPS, and it's an entry point as well to build cross-platform apps. And I'm not talking about mobile apps only, but think of desktop apps as well and video games. And in HTML, we saw how to make different types of titles according to the hierarchy. Title 1, Title 2, it goes all the way to 6. Paragraphs, links, how to link to other pages, how to put images on your page, how to work with lists, which couldn't be ordered or unordered, how to create tables, define the table head and the body, and different cells with the elements. Forms, we saw a bunch of input field types, and there are some more that you can search as well. And what the main structure of a document was, the head and then the body. CSS. In the world of CSS, we covered how to use it, how to include CSS, which could be in an external file or inline CSS, and it can also be on the document and also on the actual tag. How to select elements by their ID, by their class, by their tag. Sometimes you need to use reset.css to get rid of the browser's default styles and build your own on top of that. The box model, that is a really important concept, a really important takeaway from this whole chapter. Margins, borders, paddings, how much space is an element really going to use. Floating elements, how we can use that to have our layout adapt to the screen resolution, to make it responsive. That's a key element in our post-PC or post-computer world we live in. The width, how we can define maximum values, minimum values, how when using a fixed width we can center horizontally. Background images for our containers, and how to style and format fonts, different font families, font color, if it's bold or not, etc. So now that you've reached the end, it'd be awesome if you can take a couple of minutes and fill out our course evaluation survey. I'm very interested in knowing what you thought about this course, how it could be improved, what else do you want to learn. Sometimes it's good to sit for a minute and think of which skills you want to work on over the next few months or the next year. And if you let us know about that, and a lot of people are asking for the same things, we can work something out. What should our next course be about? And don't forget to check out our Twitter and Facebook to follow us and like our Facebook page. And we also have this game development and app development blog, Game Dev Academy, where we also post special coupons as well for some of the other courses. You're welcome to check that out. And some of the other courses we have, there's a JavaScript one coming out. And we have courses on mobile apps, on games, on WordPress development, web development. So it'd be great if you like this course to check out our other courses as well. So we'll see you in the next course. And thanks again for joining us here. I'm very happy to have had you in this course. See ya.